coming down to the last speaker. And most of you are here just exactly for this gentleman. Stewart Rhodes founded Oath Keepers on April 19, 2009 on Lexington Green to commemorate the shot heard around the world. He is the president of Oath Keepers, and so that you know where he comes from, he has made this a nonpartisan association of currently serving military, reserves, National Guard, police, fire, and associates. And you don't have to be currently serving, you can be retired like many of us are, as I look out there at the silver hair that I see. We did swear to fulfill an oath, and that oath is to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, so help us God. Foreign and domestic. Keep that in the back of your mind, folks. That oath, mandated by Article 6 of the Constitution, is to the Constitution, not to our politicians, not to political parties. We as Oath Keepers declare that we will not obey unconstitutional orders. The Stewart is a former Army paratrooper. He is a Yale Law School graduate and was a Yale research scholar. He's a former firearms instructor, was a Montana volunteer firefighter, and a former staffer of Congressman Ron Paul. Stewart and the Oath Keepers stridently defend our liberties and the Constitution and are boots on the ground where needed. We are pleased and honored to introduce Stewart Rhodes.
I'm not that short. There you go. There you go. Thank you. Joe's a pretty modest guy. He was a master sergeant in the Army.
Sergeant Major.
I'm sorry. Sergeant Major. I keep forgetting that. Sergeant Major in the Army. And he was infantry himself. I'm proud to know him. Today is about the warriors. That's why I picked April 1917, or 19, well, I'm screwing up. That's why I picked April 19, 2009 to found Oath Keepers in Lexington Green, was that if I'm going to start an organization that's about fidelity to the Constitution, and it's not focused on politicians, it's not focused on lawyers and judges, I could care less about, what matters to me is not the oath I took as a lawyer, and certainly I meant what I said, but the oath that really went to my heart was the one I took as a young soldier before I became a paratrooper in the Army. And so the politicians have had their chance. And it's good to know that there's still a few good ones out there, but that's not where I put the survival of this country. It's not really in their hands. It's in the hands of you, the people, and in particular, you, the veterans. How many here were sworn an oath to support the Constitution as either military or police? What do you have in common that the great majority of politicians don't? You understood that it could cost your life to keep that oath, right? That's what they say about a veteran. A veteran writes a blank check made out to the American people for an amount up to and including their life. 240 years ago, men who understood what that obligation meant bled on Lexington Green, and then bled again at Concord Bridge, and then fought and bled, chasing the British all the way back to Boston. And I'm going to tell you about two of them. One a current serving, one a veteran. The current serving example from Lexington Green and Concord Bridge was a militia commander from the active militia of Massachusetts named Isaac Davis. Here's a man who was a local gunsmith, well respected in his community, father of 5 children, and he ran the active militia and he trained them so well that they were picked to be the lead element when they were deploying to Concord Bridge that day, because his guys were squared away. He went above the normal standard for training and equipment, and his guys were the only ones with bayonets on their muskets that day, so they were up in the front ranks. Now, Isaac Davis had had a premonition that if it came to a fight, he was not going to survive, that he would die. It was a conviction and just a feeling he had that if it came to blows, he would not live. And yet, on the way there, he was asked if any of his men were afraid to go to Concord. They'd seen the smoke, and they were on their way there. And he said, not one of us is afraid, even though he had a premonition he would not live. And he did fall that day. One of the first men to fall at Concord Bridge and the first officer killed in the American Revolution was Isaac Davis. So there's an example of a current serving oath keeper who kept his oath that day, even though he knew it cost him his life. Now that day, another gentleman fought who was no longer current serving. And remember, when I say a militia guy was current serving, it's because who was the Army of the United States? The people were, the militia. There was no standing army. The only standing army they knew of were the regulars facing them. So the other veteran that day, other warrior that day, was Samuel Whitmore, an 80-year-old veteran of the French and Indian Wars. At this time, he was a farmer tilling his field, and he saw the British marching towards Lexington and Concord. And then he saw the smoke rising, and he knew a fight was on. So what did he do? Did he say, oh, I sure hope this, the current serving to get it handled? Did he go hand them a pocket constitution or a pamphlet? Did he say, go keep your oath? No. He dropped his plow, went inside, got his musket off the wall. He also grabbed a captured French sword that he had from the war, stuck it in his belt, and 2 French dueling pistols that he had relieved from a Frenchman in a sudden negotiation. He took those, the dueling pistols, sword, and his musket, and he went down and he ambushed the column at close range. Now, he was not young enough to go run and gun with all the young guys and swarm around the British. He just picked his position carefully. He had no plans on going anywhere. He fired 3 shots, musket and both pistols, dropped 3 regulars in their tracks. And then he drew his sword and charged. The British, because they were all carrying bayonets, attacked him, and he fought bayonet against sword. And he was shot in the face and then bayoneted multiple times and left for dead. When his family came out to get his body, they thought he was dead. They didn't realize he's still alive. And not only was he still alive, he was doing his best to reload his musket for one more shot at the column. That was Samuel Whitmore, a veteran. 80 years old. So all you old guys out there, all you veterans, you're not off the hook, okay? If he could do it, an 80-year-old farmer, you can do it. He understood that he was still obligated to fight. Now, years later, he was asked, why did he fight that? He survived, actually. He lived another 18 years and fathered more children. But he was asked later, after the revolution was won, he was asked, why did you do that day? Why did you fight? And his answer was, I did not want my children or my grandchildren to be subject to a distant king. That's why he fought. So Isaac Davis, the man who had 5 children, was killed, left those children fatherless. Samuel Whitmore was willing to give his life for the grandchildren that he knew he probably wouldn't see grow up. Why? It's because they understood, they had their priorities straight. They understood that what really matters is whether your children or grandchildren are free. Not you. You're all going to die. Some of you pretty soon, right? You're getting up there in age. I turned 50 in a few days. Our days are numbered. This fleeting existence we have here is nothing in the great scheme of things in God's creation. But what matters is what we do, our legacy that we leave for our children and grandchildren. You know, Thomas Paine in The Crisis of 1776, where he wrote an inspiring, hopefully to inspire the men to re-enlist, he wrote about how he had seen a Tory, a loyalist, standing at the doorway of a tavern with a child in his arms, and he heard this Tory say, well, so long as there's peace in my day. That was the Tory's attitude. Just go along to get along. Peace in my day. I won't stick my neck out. And Thomas Paine described this and said, this is, you know, a horrible perspective for any American to have. He said, better to be said, if there must be trouble, let it be in my day, so that my child will have peace. Once again, he understood what really matters. Now, back in 2009 on Lexington Green, I told the story of Isaac Davis and Samuel Whitmore to launch Oath Keepers. And I did that because it showed the responsibility and the mindset that must be there among the current serving, and also the mindset and responsibility that must be there among you veterans. If you don't have that kind of conviction and the willingness to give your life for your country, then nothing else matters. You won't do anything else. Aristotle, ancient Greek philosopher, said that courage is the first virtue, because without courage, none of the other virtues matter. I went to Yale Law School, some pretty smart people, brilliant, some of them very brilliant, but a lot of them were gutless, and they were willing to sell out their convictions and their principles, as we see in Washington, D.C. now, right? If you don't have courage, you can be the wisest man to ever walk the earth, or a brilliant mathematician or rocket scientist. But if you don't have the guts to do what's right, you'll never do it. So courage must come first. And so that's why we focus so much on the guys and the gals that we know do have courage. We know the current serving have courage and honor. We've seen it. A lot of you service people like that. They're out there right now. And I know a lot of you veterans have a lot of courage and honor. But the question is always, do you know what's right? And we know from having gone to public school, and as Tom Tancredo said, they're not taught their heritage and their history. They wouldn't know the first thing about April 19th. In fact, I was up in Minnesota speaking to a Tea Party group. Well, actually, it was a Republican Party group. And I said, what is the significance of April 19th? What's this the anniversary of? And one lady said, oh, it's the anniversary of Oklahoma City. And then another one said, well, the Waco standoff. That's what the media wants you to think about, right? It's all about the attack on Oklahoma City, or maybe even just the Waco standoff. They don't want you to think about April 19, 1775. This should be a national holiday. April 19, 1775 was the birthday of our republic. It wasn't when the Declaration of Independence was passed, not to me. The republic was born on Lexington Green and at Concord Bridge, and it was born with hot steel and cold lead, and the cries of wounded men, and the cries of anger and rage of the Patriots, and cries of fear of the British regulars as they were chased back to Boston. That's where it was born. The Declaration of Independence is only its birth certificate, confirming what was already a reality. That day when the shot was heard around the world, fired by the embattled farmers, that is where the choice was made to become a new nation. Whether some Americans didn't know it or not. The process was begun. And once it started, there was no stopping it. It was going to happen. We today are in much the same situation they were in. We are in a lead-up on the verge of conflict in this country once again, and for the same reasons. As Mike Vanderbilt laid out very well, it's not because we are enemies, domestic enemies of the Constitution or the Republic. It's because we are defenders of it, because we dare to stand in the way of its destruction. It is those who would tear it down who are the insurrectionists. They are the traitors to the Founders Republic. And I wouldn't even call anything they passed, don't even call it a law. There's no such thing as an unconstitutional law, because it's null and void from inception. It has no force, no effect, it creates no obligations in you. Don't give it the title law. You could call it an unconstitutional edict or unconstitutional bowel movement by the legislature, but it's not a law. Much like the founders, we are faced with a long train of abuses and an obvious plan to subject us to absolute tyranny. Now, a lot of Americans are like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, let me tell you, the Patriot Act is just not even the worst thing that came out of the Bush administration. And like Mike said, we're nonpartisan for a reason. In fact, there are things that were done by Republicans that could never have been done by Democrats. You know why? Because so many Republicans would have opposed it. It took a Republican to make all the other Republicans, conservatives, kind of go back to sleep. Oh, the water's nice and warm and toasty, we're all warm and fuzzy, while they turn up the heat. During the Bush administration, all of the infrastructure for the destruction of the Republic was put in place in the name of fighting the war on terrorism. The Patriot Act is nothing compared to the assertion the president can apply the laws of war to you. And that was done by President Bush. He asserted that under the AUMF, the Authorization to Use Military Force of 2001, and pursuant to his powers as the president, he could detain any American citizen, just as if you were a goat herder in Iraq or Afghanistan, indefinitely for the duration of the war on terrorism. He asserted that power. The Bush administration declared that your citizenship is irrelevant, that what matters is whether or not the president determined that you were an enemy in wartime. He also claimed the power to just have you tried by military tribunal. And he claimed the power to just kill you if you wanted to. Now, you guys that served in the military know that that's what you can do to the enemy in wartime, right? You can kill them on sight. If they surrender, you can detain them for the duration of the conflict. Or if you believe they violated the laws of war, you can have them tried in front of a tribunal and then executed for violation of the laws of war, right? That's what you can do with the enemy. Does that apply to American citizens? Who thinks it does? It doesn't. You can look at, you know where you find out where it doesn't? Article 3 of the Constitution, Section 2, says all crimes shall be tried by jury. Then Article 3, Section 3 defines a crime. It defines the crime of treason. The only place in the Constitution that lays out the definition of a crime. It says treason shall consist only of aiding the enemy, or making war against the United States, or aiding their enemies in wartime. That's the crime of treason. So for Americans accused of doing those things, that is what is known as treason. But it also says, and no person shall be convicted of treason unless upon 2 witnesses to the same overt act or confession in open court. So that tells you right there, to me, that's the smoking gun to let you know how illegitimate is this claimed power of the executive branch to kill you, detain you, or try you by military tribunal. It must be a jury trial of your peers, and it requires 2 witnesses, extra evidence, not just 1, 2, or confession in open court. And what were they trying to prevent? Why confession in open court? What was it they were worried about?
Torture.
Torture, coerced confessions. In their day, they'd seen the history in England of the Star Chamber, where you were tortured, forced to confess your treason to the king, and then you were drawn and quartered. They'd seen that. So they told us precisely what must be done with any American accused of making war against our country or aiding the enemy. They must get a trial for treason. And yet, millions of Americans cheered and supported the idea that Jose Padilla, an American citizen, or Yasser Hamdi, another American citizen, could be detained for 3 years in a military brig in South Carolina. No grand jury indictment, no jury trial, because they were bad guys. We got to get the bad guys. And as Mike said, that's the sentiment of, we'll tear down the laws, tear down the Constitution, throw it in the trash to go get the bad guys. But then what happens to the protections that you and your children rely upon to prevent tyranny over you? And look what you had happen to you. So many conservatives were so trusting of George Bush because they saw him as a Christian patriot, they were willing to go along with that. And what'd you get right after him? I think God is punishing you for your transgressions, showing you a very direct lesson. And now what you might get next is Hillary. The only worst person as President of the United States I can think of is Hillary Clinton. Imagine what that'll be like. It's almost like with the ancient Israelites. When they disobeyed God and turned away, what did he do? He gave them a correction, right? You're getting your correction. I cannot stand here and keep my oath and sugarcoat the reality of our responsibility for letting our country get to where it is. The creation of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, the creation of NORTHCOM, a military command over the United States, both of those done during the Bush years. Is that constitutional? What entity is the Homeland Security of the United States in the Founders Republic? The militia is. You are the Homeland Security. The late Colonel Jeff Cooper said that in one of his writings, one of his commentaries. He said, the armed citizen is the Department of Homeland Security. And so long as the armed citizen is equipped, trained, and ready to defend their liberty, no government can overcome them. And all he's doing is articulating the wisdom of the founders. It was their understanding, their insight, that the only way you could ever have a free republic that lasted is if you were your own guardians. That was their answer to the ancient question of who shall guard the guardians. When you have a professional warrior class, eventually they'll say, hey, we got all the guns, let's make all the rules. And that's what's happened over and over again throughout history. That's why they said, you the people are supposed to be the military power of the nation. Now I'm going to quiz you. What are the 3 purposes it says in Article 1, Section 8 that Congress can call forth the militia to fulfill? What are the 3 things?
Execute the laws of the Union.
One of them is execute the laws of the Union. Okay, you can't answer the rest of them. Okay, you guys right there can't answer. The rest of you? Okay, what are the other 2? Suppress insurrections. Good. What's the last one? To repel invasions. Who answered that? Good job. You guys are way better than folks in Minnesota. They just blew it. None of them knew any of those. It was terrible. You're right. To repel invasions, to suppress insurrections, to execute the laws of the Union. Now let's look at that. Look at the suppression of insurrection. Let's take Bundy Ranch, for example, right? Harry Reid declared us all to be an insurrection. He declared us domestic terrorists. Imagine if Barack Obama had to call forth the militia to go and crack down on the ranching Bundy family and their cowboy friends and all the militia and veterans that showed up to defend them. Imagine if he had no choice but to go to you, the people, as the state militias, and call you forth. What could you do? Tell them to stick it. That's right. If you didn't agree with it, if you said, hey, wait a minute, they're not insurrection. You're the one that's an insurrection against the Constitution. We're just going to sit right here. You go do it. Let's say you and Eric Holder and Harry Reid Go put on the plate carriers and get your M4s out and go do it yourself, Mr. Obama. We're not going to do it. He'd be up a creek without a paddle. Does he have to rely on you, though? No, he doesn't. He can send in DHS, FBI, ATF, DEA, all the other alphabet soup, BLM. He can have contract guys at BLM come in, right? Which is what they did. They brought in, sad to say, they brought in Special Forces retired snipers in there and special warfare veterans who would take the paycheck from BLM. That's who they brought in. He didn't have to rely on you because you're not even equipped. You're not even organized. You're not even a real militia anymore. But whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? It's your fault. That's right. We have let the institution that the founders considered necessary for the security of a free state, we've let it wither away and die, to be replaced with professional warriors, professional military, professional police. In the founders' day, you, the people, were the posse behind your sheriff. You were part. It wasn't he has his job to defend you against criminals. No, it's you did it together. You were his posse. It was a team of the people and the sheriff. That's a law enforcement function of you. You were also the military of your own nation as the militia. Two key elements, law enforcement and military, were both in the hands of the people. The men elected their own officers over them in the militia. The posse elected their own sheriff. There was no such a thing as the voters over here and then the posse over here. They were one and the same. There was no such thing as the militia over here and the voters over here. They were one and the same thing. You elected your own officers, you elected your own sheriff. And then you went out as the posse or as the militia and you executed the laws of the Union. So on that one, let's imagine they managed to pass some kind of nonsense ban in Congress, like another so-called assault weapons ban, and outlaw certain semi-automatic rifles of military description and use. Imagine that. Now imagine they had to, in order to enforce it, in order to execute it, the so-called law, that they had to turn to the militia. What could you do again? Your governors could refuse to even ask you to deploy. But even if your governor was a quisling, what could you do? All your officers and all the NCOs could tell the governor to stuff it too. Without you, they couldn't do it. But they don't have to use you. Once again, they've got this massive, growing cancer that's over you, a swarm of officers, as our founders said in the Declaration, being sent out to eat out your sustenance. This is happening all over again. And I encourage you, on this anniversary of the Battle of Lexington and Concord, I encourage you to go and read the causes of taking up arms. Go read their list of grievances against the king in the Declaration of Independence. I also encourage you to read what's known as the Declaration of Causes for Taking Up Arms. Go read what they said. Among them were denial of jury trial. Among them were, as was earlier mentioned, I think Mara mentioned it, when she read, along with General Gage came martial law of Boston, but also a decree that town hall meetings were now banned all across Massachusetts. That was called the Governance of Massachusetts Act. Now it's interesting. In Boston, you had rich merchants like John Hancock, a notorious smuggler. You had Sam Adams, a rabble-rouser. But these were all city folks. And the British Crown was looking at them going, oh, these town hall meetings are the source of the problem, so let's just ban them. But they banned them throughout Massachusetts. Now what do you think happened when the country folk heard that now their town hall meetings were banned? What do you think? Guys like Samuel Whitmore? Farmers on the frontier who'd grown up with a musket and a hatchet sitting next to their plow while they tilled the field so they could fight at a moment's notice against the French and Indians on the frontier. What was their response? Did they go, oh, we can't have town hall meetings anymore. I guess we'll just sit here and wait for the next edict from the king. Was that their response? No. They nullified. They went ahead and held town hall meetings. In fact, at the time, General Gage was living across the harbor in Salem, and they held a town hall meeting in Salem, right under his nose. And they held it for extra long time, longer than they usually did, to give him plenty of chance to come do something about it. That's what they did. So what did he do about it? Nothing. You know why? He wrote back to Parliament and said, I need more men. He could not enforce the edicts of Parliament and the king because he didn't have enough men. Now, why did he not have enough men? What was on the other side facing him? The militia of the people, organized, equipped, and trained as a community. There are more good people than bad. But if the good people are not organized and the bad guys are, who do you think wins? You, the people, if you're not organized, the bad guys can come in the middle of the night while you're in your underwear, mom and dad and a couple of kids, and take you out. Whether it's private bad guys like MS-13 or some other gang, whether it's the cartels down on the borders happening right now, or whether it's public bad guys like the secret police throughout history, they can only do that if you're not organized as a community. At Lexington Green and Concord, they had to send entire British units down there, regiments, battalions. They had to send that many troops to go and try to get Sam Adams and Hancock. Why? Because they couldn't just use a dozen officers to go raid them like a SWAT team, because there was the militia. Just like right now, look at Sheriff Arpaio down in Arizona. He's got a 3,000-man posse. No matter how much he might piss off Barack Obama or Eric Holder, can they just send in some DHS team, some contractor guys who just got out of SF, and go arrest Sheriff Arpaio? They could try, but they might get their butts handed to them by his 3,000-man posse. You can't just say, I support the sheriff, and then expect him to interpose and defend you without you being his posse. You've got to be shoulder to shoulder with him in defense, common defense of your liberty in your county. And they're really, since we don't have a real militia anymore, a real militia would be every able-bodied citizen in the community. That's a real militia, okay? It's not enough just to have a handful of guys that say, okay, we're the militia, we're going to protect you. That's a select militia at best. A real militia is all of you together. Every one of you. That's what it really needs to be. But on the way there, I can't think of a better step in between than to have a strong sheriff, a constitutional sheriff, and a posse behind that sheriff. That is a critical game changer. Up in upstate New York, we got Sheriff Lowry. I was up there at the Capitol in Albany at a protest against the SAFE Act, and I spoke right before he did. And I asked the people, I said, hey, is your county a come and take it county, or is it a bend over and take it county? You know? And it's really kind of the same question for you guys here, right? You're in the same position. And Sheriff Lowry got up and said, my county, he's like Herman Munster, he's this big, huge sheriff. He gets up and says, I want you to know that my county is a come and take it county. You know, and of course the crowd cheered, but he has to have a posse behind him. To give that teeth, a sheriff has a great deal of clout, authority, and respect, as he should, as the elected sheriff of the people. But to really round that out and give it some serious teeth, he has to have a posse. So all of you here today, I challenge you, if you got a good sheriff in particular, like this sheriff here, if you got a good sheriff, you have an absolute duty to serve as his posse. Duty is ours, results are God's. And you need to set aside your fear for your own skin. Looking back over the last 6 years of Oath Keepers, since I started it, when I founded Oath Keepers, I used those two stories for a reason. I wanted all of the people that were going to be part of this organization, or anybody who would also recommit to defending the Constitution, to understand what it really means to do that. It needs to be a conviction that you're willing to fight if you must. We'll try to avoid that all we can. But you must have that resolute spirit of defiance and the willingness to give your life. And you must let go of fear. What is the antidote to fear? Well, I think that's partly true, but I think that's right. Love is the true antidote to fear. What's the good book tell us? Greater love hath no man than this, that he will give his life for his friend. Love is the spirit that drives out fear and hatred. Okay? Love of country. There's an old Irish rebel song called the Patriot Game, and I just listened to it on the way over here by the Clancy brothers. And it opens up with this line that says, "Come all ye young rebels, and list while I sing. For the love of one's country is a terrible thing. It banishes fear with the speed of a flame, and it makes us all part of the Patriot game." Love of country and love of your families and love of your children and your grandchildren is what drives away fear. Just imagine if every American stood up with that kind of sentiment in their hearts of love of country, and as Thomas Paine said, understanding the priority of making sure their children are free. Imagine if we all stood with that spirit and then went out and did what we said we would do and raised our right hand. Right? We wouldn't have any problems in this country. It'd be over overnight. How many millions of us are veterans now? We have more veterans, in fact, more combat vets right now than any other time in our history, I think. Rivaled only by World War II. In fact, we got a couple right here today. Where's Matt and John? Two brothers I just met a little while ago. Where are they at? Come here, guys. Here you go. You got Matt's an infantry combat vet from Iraq. His brother John was a rigger. Tomorrow we're gonna do some training up here, and they're gonna help me teach some folks some basic infantry training. But here's an example of the young warriors that are coming out of the U.S. military right now. Okay, take a good look at these guys. This is what was at Bundy Ranch. Something you need to understand when I said we're on the eve of conflict is how close we were at Bundy Ranch to a conflict in this country. On the other side, on the BLM side, as I already said, to the great desecration of special forces and their motto of de oppresso liber, to liberate the oppressed, there were hireling SF vets over there pointing their sniper rifles at cowboys over here. But the good news is there were guys like this behind the cowboys pointing their sniper rifles right back. You had recently discharged Marines, a whole bunch of Marines, Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, Special Forces veterans, 101st Airborne, 10th Mountain Division Airborne. We had snipers, we had guys from Montana and 50 cals and 338 Lapuas. One of them I know personally. He shot his last elk at 960 yards. So there were some serious people on the other side. It would have been sheepdog on sheepdog. It would not have been like at Waco, trained professionals versus untrained churchgoers. This was going to be a fight among warriors, and they saw that, and they knew that, and that's why they blinked. Now, we know from later on, not long after Bundy Ranch happened, the Washington Times reported that the Obama administration actually considered a military strike at Bundy Ranch. That had been on the table in their little discussions inside the administration, but they decided against it. And I think one of the reasons they decided against it is they saw guys like this on the other side right there on the ground, but they also knew they were the tip of the iceberg. For every guy who jumped in his truck, every pissed off veteran who got in his truck and drove to Bundy Ranch, there were hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of more who felt exactly the same way, who did not go. Now, I think that they also realized that if these guys who just got out feel that way, what do you think is the mindset of the guys that are still in their unit that they just left? Are they much different? What do you think? Nope. No. For every young Marine vet and every young Army vet they saw there that day, in Navy and Air Force, they knew that the guys that are still in, behind the BLM, behind the hirelings, out there supposedly under government control, that they're the same mindset. And if they'd have shot and killed a bunch of young veterans that day, and all the old veterans, all Vietnam vets that were there too, if they'd have shot and killed us all, they'd have had to worry not just about us and all the rest of our brothers across the country. They would have had to worry about the current serving too. And that is the genius of the founders. People say, oh, you can't fight the modern US military, all their drones and helicopters and all that kind of stuff. The genius of the founders is this. If you, the people, come together in mutual defense, as was done at Bundy Ranch, as is being done right now in Oregon, if you stand together, they can't do it with a few hirelings. They can't do it with a few sociopaths. There will always be a small fraction who will follow the orders and do as they are told. We have seen this throughout history. But there's never enough of them if you are organized. They can't do it in the middle of the night with a secret snatch team, like they're getting ready to practice with Jade Helm. That's what that is, you know. There won't be enough of them if you are united. And if you are united, they won't be able to get away with it with a select little small group of hit teams. And instead, they'll have to try to call on the U.S. Marine Corps and the U.S. Army and try to send guys like this to do it. And now they're not dealing with a small, well-vetted cadre of loyal, obedient trigger pullers. Now they have to worry about getting these guys, country boys from all over the country, to come shoot their families and their own neighbors. They're not going to do it. So that causes them some trouble. What they want you to do, though, is to be afraid to organize, afraid to come together. They want you to stay in your houses and so they can come take you down one at a time. Or even better, just strike fear into your hearts so you don't stand up, which many Americans have done. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, well, I don't want to be on a list. And I don't want to, attend public meetings. I'm just staying under the radar. What do you think has happened to a person that makes that decision? What's that? They've let fear control their behavior, right? A person who is afraid to come to a gathering like this, afraid to associate with each other, afraid to start a neighborhood watch. I've actually had guys in Oath Keepers who resigned because of our CPT program because they don't want to start neighborhood watches. To me, it's just shameful that they even joined my organization. If you're afraid to start a neighborhood watch, you are never going to stand up. You won't stand up now. You won't stand up when the time comes. You've already just chopped off your nuts and mailed them off to Obama. Sorry to get crude. Sorry, ladies. But it's the truth. You have to exercise your liberty muscles. Stand up and be at least willing to start a neighborhood watch, come to a rally like this, associate with your fellow patriots, veteran and non-veteran, and start acting like Americans again. A full spectrum American does not just vote. A full spectrum American is the militia, is the jury. You understand how important those two institutions are, right? A jury, this is why jury trial is so important, even for Americans accused of terrorism or accused of being traitors. Because if you tear down their protections, you tear down your own. In the Founders Republic, only a jury of your own peers, your fellow neighbors, can ever take away your life or liberty. Only they have judgment over you. The president can't do it, the governor can't do it, your mayor can't do it, the sheriff can't do it, the police chief can't do it. No one can do it. No one can say he is guilty, throw him in prison, or he is guilty, put him to death. No one can do that except a jury of your own peers. The power of judgment of life and death is in your hands as the people. just as the power of life and death as the posse behind your sheriff and as the militia, the military power, is also in your hands, if you will take it back. So you must become full spectrum Americans again. And that means you must be willing to stand up in physical space with other Americans and come together and train. Don't worry about lists. If you're all on the list becomes useless. And the founders understood that. They were all in the militia. All of the able-bodied men were in the militia. And then they had the Sons of Liberty, the more secretive organization that raised some cane, right? So they did have a yin and a yang kind of thing going. They had a secret organization for certain things, but they had very public militias. And it was the existence of those public militias that kept Gage from being able to send a few officers to go arrest Hancock and Adams. He had to send entire units of regulars to go do it, and then he got a fight on his hands. So understand that. You want them to have to try to use the Marine Corps or the Army on you. Bring it. Throw me in that briar patch. You want them to have to try to get young guys like this to come do it for them. Because I know for a fact that there is at least an 80% to 20% division in the ranks that's on our side right now. They have not successfully brainwashed the young men and women in uniform. They have not conditioned them to only follow orders. They have not erased the American spirit inside of them. It is still there. Am I right? All right. Thank you, guys. The only way they can ever tyrannize this country is to get you to self-tyrannize, to get you to become so afraid you stop acting like Americans, and that you shut up and sit down and just take it. They want you to hide in your homes and be afraid to associate, to chill your own speech. It's the only way they can do it. And even if worse came to, push came to shove and there was a shot fired at Bundy Ranch and the fight was on, they could then only do it one house at a time if you just sat there and waited for them to come get you. Again, not coming together. So all you need to do to defeat them is come together. Don't be afraid to come together. There'll be a time and a place for guys that are like Samuel Whitmore that no one even knew they were there and off the radar screen, almost definitely. But especially you folks that are still fit enough to do it, you need to come together. You know what? I'm going to let you all the old guys off the hook. I don't care how old you are, you should be getting involved right now. You can train the younger guys, you can drive the vehicles, you can man the base station radio. And like I got an old guy that's where I live, and he's in his 60s, never served in the military, did construction his whole life. He's one of our engineers in our CPT. He's also part of my home guard. When I'm not, right now, he's guarding my house. And one last comment. Even if you get a sheriff's posse, even if you were to have a county militia or a state militia again, none of them are going to be able to project out and go do anything without that home guard, without those neighborhood watches. Right now, no sheriff deputy, no EMT, no firefighter no National Guardsman is going to leave the wife and kids if they're not safe. Isn't that right? They're not going to do it. They will only be able to project out if they know their family is safe. So that's why it's on your heads. It's your responsibility to be the home guard. If you're not young and fit and can't go run around up and down mountains, you can still guard the household, guard the home. So there is a bedrock importance for those neighborhood watches. It has to be there. That's the foundation. Then out of that, everything else comes later, okay? But I encourage you to go look at our website, oathkeepers.org, and look at our CPT program, which stands for Community Preparedness Teams. And the point of those is not that we want everyone to come join Oath Keepers. It's just we want the veterans to understand their duty and responsibility to turn around and share their knowledge and help their neighbors get organized and trained. And so tomorrow, we're going to lead by example and have a nice little bit of training in small unit tactics and basic infantry patrolling for those who are willing to come out to it. Joe will tell you where it's going to be. I believe at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, there's going to be a little quick rally here, a rally point. You just come here and you can follow the guys up to the location for the training. But if you have any questions or need directions, just ask Joe. But Joe, I want you to do me a favor, Joe. And folks, I want you to know one more thing. In this audience today, we have Lieutenant Colonel retired Lakin, who stood up against the Obama administration and refused to deploy because he did not believe President Obama was qualified to be Commander-in-Chief. Colonel Lakin, do you mind standing up? He's too modest to come speak. He declined the invitation to speak because he's kind of a modest guy. But there's an example of a guy that put his career on the line for what he believed in. And so there are men like that still in the military, and women. So don't ever lose faith in them or forsake them. Don't take it for granted. We saw during Katrina some current serving obey some pretty obviously unconstitutional orders. That's why it's incredibly important to always reach out to them and try to teach them more about the Constitution. But also don't forsake them, okay? It's a battle for their hearts and minds too. Joe, I'd like you to do me a favor. Sergeant Major. I'd like to have Joe lead you guys in an oath renewal ceremony for those who would like to do that. And we've done this at some events since Lexington Green. For those of you, this is something that the founding generation did. A lot of folks don't know it. But in 1798, in the crisis over the Alien and Sedition Acts, as Mike talked about earlier, it was tearing the country apart. You already had, at the young age of the Republic, they were being torn apart from party loyalty. And so you had some men who were veterans of the Battle of Lexington who came there again with their sons who were now in the militia with them. And they stood on Lexington Green and they renewed their oaths to the Constitution. They thought it was so important that in a time of discord and controversy and internal turmoil, that they should come back to what really matters, is their oath. And so they did that. They stood on Lexington Green and they renewed their oaths. So that's why we did the same thing. That's why we still do that today. We still, on occasion, will renew our oaths. So for those of you who ever swore the oath and would like to renew it, please join us. And for those of you who've never taken the oath to support and defend the Constitution, but would like to take one and become an oath keeper in that sense, then I encourage you to join with us. But don't do it unless you're deadly serious about it. Because once you raise that right hand, that's where your choice is made. You no longer have an option to say, well, I can't go do this or I can't go do that. Then it becomes a matter of duty. And duty is ours, results are God's, right? So don't take it unless you have the same conviction of the veterans of being willing to give your life in the keeping of that oath, okay? So for those who like to do that, I'll have the Sergeant Major here do the oath ceremony for you.
Before we do that, you and I have been doing this since, what, 2009?
2009.
Right. Not the same bunch, but you could call us part of the coalition of willing Lilliputians. We're the little guys trying to take down the giant. I'd like to present to you your official notation of coverage by the 100 Heads Life Insurance Company. Now, those of you that read my blog will know who the 100 Heads Life Insurance Company is. Basically, it began as a very sincere offer to me, saying that, Mr. Vanderbilt, we understand that one day the ATF's going to come and collect your head, and I just want you to understand that I'll collect 100 heads for yours. And he signed it with the MOS numbers of a Marine Corps Scout sniper who's perfectly capable of collecting 100 heads. And after I published this, I just commented, just get the right 100 heads. And a friend of mine said, well, you know, Mike, 100 heads could finish this thing. 100 right heads could finish this thing. So I wanted to take this opportunity to let you know that you are covered by the 100 Heads Life and Casualty.
Thank you. Mike was there at Lexington Green with us, and he's been, right now, let's make this clear. Right now, as we speak, there are oath keepers and there are 3%ers in Oregon standing up and defending the due process rights of those minors right now while we speak. And today, they are doing an oath renewal ceremony. So once again, don't say it unless you mean it just like they do. You know they mean it. You got to know you mean it too. Just keep that in mind. Today is a sacred day in American history. And we don't know, for all we know, the shot heard around the world could happen tonight or later this week. We don't know. But I do know one thing, is the spirit of 1775, not just 1776. The spirit of 1775 is alive and well in America. And so long as we all keep it alive, I don't care what what so-called laws they pass, whatever they do in Washington, D.C. The Republic lives inside of us, so long as we draw breath, right? That's right. Right.
Stewart, thanks a million for all that you do for this country. We appreciate it. Thanks for recognizing these hard-fighting veterans. All of you know what it means to stand up and say what we're about to say. If you will, I state your name, Joseph A. Santoro, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservations or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Hoorah!